Good morning, everybody. My name is Tony Townsend. I come from the University of Glasgow in Scotland, and I'm originally Australian. So hopefully what I'm able to say today will be still of interest to you, particularly if you're looking at how do we manage the whole concept of learning within schools, and of course self-evaluation becomes part of that process. We also have, I think, a different interpretation of what we might see education as being. And as you can see, a long time ago, I wrote this, that I think the school has two different levels of responsibility. The first responsibility is the care of the children, and the second responsibility is to consider the community in which those children live. The research tells us that the more active parents and the community are in a child's education, the better the child does. So the more we support and improve the community, the more we are helping ourselves. But I think the other question that we now need to address is how do we support student learning? So this is the question. Where is the one place in school where students learn? Anyone like to tell me? Learning only occurs in one place. It does not occur in a political statement. It does not occur in a ministerial curriculum. It does not occur in a school policy. It only occurs when it changes how a student thinks. Or it occurs when it changes how a teacher thinks. Or it occurs when it changes how a head teacher thinks. So we need to make sure that everything that we focus on is changing what happens inside here. So I want to now spend a few minutes looking at what changes, what helps student learning. These people did a tremendous amount of analysis of other people's research. They came up with 28 different things that help students learning, and they were able to put them in order of importance. There were 6 different categories, and if we look at those categories, they come out like this. The closer you are to the student, the more likely you will impact on learning. The further away from the student you are, the less likely you will have any effect. So a national education policy will not change student learning unless that policy is accepted by teachers, by parents, and by students themselves. The second piece of research, because this is now nearly 20 years old, much more recent research that was referred to by John Macbeth the other day, again you can see it's a meta-analysis of a substantial range of previous data. And again, without going into the specific detail, these were the results. If we look at some students being able to perform higher than other students, 50% of the reason why some students do better than others, we can track back to the student themselves. These are their family backgrounds, this is the community in which they live, this is their attitude towards school, this is their previous experiences, and so on. Now, we have to remember that we can impact on this 50%, but we can't control it. But if we look at the side that we have much more control over, then we can say that two-thirds of that is really associated with what teachers do. So if we put those two together, essentially 80% of the differences between student learning are either the student or the teacher. So had he concluded that if we're really interested in improving student learning, what teachers do is extremely critical. So part of the issue is really how do we engage students in their learning? How do we get them excited about what they're learning about? And this particular graphic suggests that there are a number of different levels that we can look at. At this particular level, the learning is isolated. Facts are simply there because we need to know them. How many people in the room can tell me the formula for acceleration? How many people with their hands up were either science or mathematics teachers? Okay. Anybody else tell me what the formula is? See how good your teaching is? We have all learned this. We probably all passed the test. But apart from doing the test, this had no meaning. These people argue that if we want to engage young people in their learning, we have to look at larger pieces of information. Instead of looking at individual facts, we need to develop their concepts. For every word that we use, we have a concept. We have a concept of red, a concept of family, a concept of golf, a concept of country. And these are all products of our own experiences and our interaction with those experiences. So if we help young people to understand their concepts, then we're helping them to understand their life. We need to recognise, however, that concepts are not necessarily neutral. We have people who will have a different opinion about the same concept. So for instance, if I use the word that Kathleen used yesterday, the word gypsy, there will be different concepts of what that means. Some will be positive, some will be negative. However, when we discuss our concepts, we help each other to understand a different world. If we move to the best level, according to these, we get to what we might call global self-regulated learners. And this changes the relationship between teaching and learning. It becomes this: if you're not learning, how can I be a teacher? If I was in a forest among the trees and there was nobody there, can I teach? There has to be a relationship between learning and teaching. In fact, now, instead of saying teaching and learning, most people say learning and teaching. Now, how do we get people engaged? We ask them questions. You will notice at the start of each one of these things, I ask you questions. As soon as you are asked a question, your brain will try to answer it. You may not verbalise, but you will try to answer it. But then, of course, what we need to think about is assessment. How do we assess student progress? Well, in the past we seem to have assessed them in ways that are not terribly helpful to students. What I'm arguing is that perhaps what we need to ask are a different set of questions. If students are not performing at the level that we would like, we need to be asking questions of ourselves. How are we doing? Who are we not serving? How do we know it will work? It's questions of ourselves that will lead to assessment of students that will be much better. This has been mentioned a couple of times already. We need to start looking at what we value and how we might be able to measure that, rather than only focusing on those things that can be measured. And to do that, we may need to be looking at a variety of different methods of assessment. If we have high levels of teacher involvement and low levels of student involvement, then we have assessment of learning. If we start to get students involved, we can have assessment for learning. And then if students are more actively involved, it's assessment as learning. And if the student is taking the major responsibility for the assessment of how they're proceeding, then it's assessment in learning. And in order to do that, I think we now need to recognise that we need to get students much more actively involved and related to their own learning. If students can only learn when they have good teachers, then one teacher that is not so good along the way can destroy everything. So a colleague of mine from Australia, Randall Finch, has made this comment. There are teachers who tell students what to do, and there are teachers who teach by asking lots and lots of questions. And I hope what I've been able to present to you this morning are some of the issues that leaders need to address when it comes to trying to improve student learning in schools.